My sister-in-law and I have an agreement. She watches my kids 3 days a week, and I watch hers 3 days a week. This agreement has stood since March 2020 without issues. Any changes have been discussed weeks in advance. A couple weeks ago, we had an argument. The next day, I brought my kids to her house, dropped them off, and left. I didn't speak to my sister-in-law, because when one of us is in a rush, like I was, it's standard for us to just let the kids out, stay in the car, and drive off when you see the door open. I drove to work, about 40 minutes away. When I got there, I had about 20 missed calls, and even more texts, all from my sister-in-law, all saying she didn't want to watch the kids given our argument. Her first text arrived a little before I got to her place, but I didn't see it until I got to work because my phone is always on silent when I drive. I rang her, said I'll arrange to work from home, then come get the kids. She said I have 45 minutes to get back to her place or she would call the police. I told my supervisor the situation, and she said I could leave after I did a few things. This delayed me 20 minutes. When I got back to my sister-in-law's, just over an hour later, she said she'd already called the police when the 45 minutes ran out. I then had to stick around long enough to tell the officer that I didn't abandon my children, there was just a communication issue. Sister-in-law and I had another shouting match later over this. I arranged other childcare for my kids and I've been mostly ignoring her since. However, she reached out and apologized, and has asked if I'd be willing to go back to the old childcare arrangement. I work with kids. If I got child abandonment on my record, I would never work in my field again, which she knew. And her calling the police was a massive overreaction, so if she needs a babysitter she can go whistle for all I care. She said that if I checked my phone, talked to her that morning, or came back when I was supposed to, she would not have needed to call the police, and I did this to myself. As she gave me a warning with that first text, and I could have checked my phone or spoken to her directly when I got to her place. All of which she says she would have done if she were in my position, given that we'd argued the night before. I've told her that if she thinks I'm babysitting for her, she's delusional, and she's on her own. Because of my refusal, it's looking like she may have to quit her job because my brother and her would pay more for a babysitter than they would earn from her working. My mother and brother have both called me an arsehole because there were no consequences to her calling the police, and that while she overreacted, she's apologized, so if I really forgive her, I'll let us move on. This income loss would also mean that she, my brother, and my niece and nephew might need to move somewhere cheaper. That my brother might have to take on extra hours at work. And in an extreme scenario they may even be completely unable to live independently, meaning they'd have to move in with her parents, who live several hours away. Background: my grandparents have always been a big part of my life, as have the rest of my family. They had 5 children, including my father, and 13 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren. My grandparents are quite rich. They had 3 businesses until last year when my grandfather died. I am the child of my grandchildren and have always been very close to them. My grandma used to babysit me until I could go to kindergarten. I wrap Christmas presents for her every year. I decorate their house, and I worked at their bar on Fridays in college, no pay, as they are too old to do these things themselves. All this was offered to my cousins, but they never helped. My grandparents ran a show horse farm for over 40 years. It was what my father took with him and I quickly began to love. I used to go every weekend with my grandma up until high school when I started studying. Even though I don't ride horses anymore, my dad and I go to clean the stalls and look after the horses every week when my grandparents are away on trips. Usually once every 2 months. My grandparents were a huge part of my life. Problem: my grandmother died 4 weeks ago. It was devastating. My grandmother left my aunts, uncles, and dad about $85,000 each. Money for which she and my grandfather worked very, very hard. It was expected. What was not expected was that they would leave me just over $45,000 along with some other valuables. I was honestly shocked. All my cousins received about $2,000 each and a few trinkets. Obviously you can see where it was going. My aunts and uncles were at the reading when I was told, so they told their children. Everyone except the parents is furious. My cousins, who are already adults, demand that I divide them equally. I don't feel like I should. I was very close to my grandparents and did a lot for them, but it's hard. My family is very tight-knit and we have holidays / monthly parties / dinners / etc. together, every year. I never expected money to tear us apart. This money can change a lot for me. I could pay off my $10,000 student loan and put the rest into my upcoming wedding / future kids / savings account. A small part of me wants to share it equally, just to have everyone together. But there was a reason they left this to me. They didn't do it to hurt anyone. I was the only one who visited them and helped them. None of them took the time to see them, except for family gatherings. But no one understands this except my parents. It seems to me that I alone destroy the family. My aunts and uncles won't talk to my father until I split the money, and my cousins won't talk to me. I only have a student loan and a car payment, so I don't have much debt, but it could give me a comfortable future. They all keep throwing in my face that they have families, house payments, college to pay for, etc. They keep saying I've been planning this for a long time, but I really didn't. I loved my grandparents. My fiancé tells me to forget about them and do what's best for me, but I'm a big family man. I don't want to split the money, that could really help me, but I feel like they can play with me, forcing me to choose between them and this. My parents also want me to keep the money for myself, as they think my family members are being ridiculous and demanding it. Is it right for me to keep that much? I feel like I deserve it. Is it right for me to put this money on my family? Or are the people I've been so close to all my life taking advantage of me? $45,000 versus $2,000 is a huge difference. P.S. There is more in the will than I explained. Houses, classic cars, horses, farm, land, CDs, etc. The cash / checking accounts I was given is the only thing that seems to be a problem for everyone. I have inherited more money than my cousins. They demand that I divide it equally between them or never speak to them again. Almost all the marriages in my family have been arranged marriages. My mom's marriage to my bio dad was an arranged marriage, but it ended up in a messy divorce and him completely abandoning us before I was even born. My mom had a love marriage the second time, despite the disapproval of her family, and has been much happier with my stepdad than she probably would have ever been with my bio dad. Because of this, my mom has always been very adamant that she would not try to force us, my siblings and I, into arranged marriages despite what the rest of our family thought. I've been with my fiancé for 3 years now. We got engaged 2 months ago. He's met my parents and siblings, but as far as the majority of my extended family were concerned, I was single until 2 months ago. Early last year, my fiancé dropped me off home after work one day and my uncle was there. My uncle is the oldest sibling my mom has, so he's seen as the head of the family. He thinks he has a say in what the rest of us do. It was obvious my uncle was pissed, and he ended up grilling my fiancé, and I assume he met his standards. A lot of arranged marriages are about what both families can gain from one another, so he told my mom to get us married quickly. He wanted to make it look like we had an arranged marriage before the rest of our family found out. My mom ignored him and told us to keep dating if it's what we wanted. Over the past year, he's mentioned me getting married to my mom every single time he's spoken to her. Apparently, my uncle assumed just because he'd given the order that we were going to get married soon. He told my cousin, his daughter, that I had agreed to an arranged marriage, and because I had and she was older, she should agree to the match he'd found her. My cousin never mentioned this to me, but she did agree to marry the man my uncle found for her. They got married late last year. They haven't had a good marriage and my cousin is very unhappy. Her husband is incredibly controlling and hardly ever lets her go anywhere without him or a member of his family. Last week, she was over at my house when my fiancé came over to drop some of the clothes I'd left at his place over. When I told my family about my engagement, they all assumed it was an arranged marriage and I didn't bother clarifying because it really isn't anyone's business. You don't tend to do sleepovers if you're having an arranged marriage, so my cousin knew immediately it wasn't what she assumed. She started asking me questions about my relationship and I answered honestly. She got really angry at me and kept demanding to know why I didn't tell her about him. The thing is, I'm very close to this cousin, but I also know how our family is about dating, and I didn't want my male cousins trying to strong-arm my fiancé. They've jokingly threatened this before. She pretty much blamed me for her arranged marriage and said she only agreed because she thought I was going to have one too, and if I had told her I had a boyfriend, she would have had the courage to stand up to her family. She hasn't spoken to me since. I do feel bad for her. I know how unhappy she is, but if she had mentioned what my uncle told her earlier, I would have clarified. I don't want this to be the end of our relationship, but I don't know what I can do to fix this. This goes back 3 years when my mom and her girlfriend got engaged. My mom put in so much time and energy into organizing this wedding and was so excited. She sent out invites to all our family members for months in advance, and almost everyone confirmed they would be going. Barely a week before the wedding, she received several messages from aunts and uncles who said they won't be going because they had other commitments, despite confirming they'd be there months prior. One of my aunts, my grandma's sister, confronted my mom and said many weren't going because they still didn't agree with the fact that she was marrying a woman, including herself, because it went against her Christian views. Meanwhile, my hardcore Christian grandma was more than happy to walk my mom down the aisle. This upset my mom, but she tried not to let it ruin her wedding. I, however, was furious. Only my grandma, my mom's sister, a few cousins, and another aunt attended the wedding, while my stepmom's entire family came. What really pissed me off was that 2 weeks later, my cousin who lives in a totally different state celebrated her sweet 16, and everyone who made excuses about not going to my mom's wedding made the journey all the way over there and posted pictures all over Facebook. It really broke my mom's heart and just felt like salt in the wound. I swore then that when I got married, everyone who did not show up to my mom's wedding would not be invited to mine. Fast forward to now, me and my girlfriend of 2 years got married first week of March, and I kept my word. The only ones we invited to our wedding was the family that did go to my mom's, and one other aunt who did have a good reason for not being there at the time because she was recovering from surgery. I wanted to clarify that I am in fact a guy. We even invited my stepmom's family too. Obviously my other family members found out and expressed their hurt over not being invited. I called them all out and said if they had a problem with my mom for being who she is, then they had a problem with me, and I wouldn't let toxic people be a part of a special day for me and my wife. My wife stood behind my decision, as did my mom. That still doesn't seem to stop them from thinking it was a move and are turning it into a whole family drama because they think it was unfair to punish them for simply believing in something different. Wow. Thank you so much for all the love and support, everyone.